WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's lawyers are making a final bid to appeal his extradition from the UK to the US on Tuesday, following over 13 years of legal battles in English courts. Assange, who is not attending his extradition hearing due to illness, has been in a UK prison since 2019. Washington aims to bring Assange to trial on 18 charges linked to significant disclosure of confidential US military documents and diplomatic cables. Speaking outside court, Assange's wife Stella told reporters that her husband's life is at risk.
There is no possibility of a fair trial if Julian is extradited to the United States. He should never be extradited to the United States. He would never be safe. This case is an admission by the United States that they now criminalize investigative journalism. What happened to Navalny can happen to Julian. He has to be released.
DD India's Stuart Smith now joins us on the story from outside the London High Court. Stuart, tell us when is the verdict expected? And as we heard Julian Assange's wife Stella saying that her husband, if convicted, would not survive in a US jail, and the case is politically motivated, she says. Do we see merit in these arguments?
Well, I'll leave the question of merit to the two High Court judges that are looking at this case over the course of Tuesday and Wednesday. They are expected to give a decision on whether Julian Assange can appeal, so not a decision on the case itself, but whether an appeal is possible on Wednesday. And the arguments then lawyers are making for Julian Assange is, yes, first of all, that this is a politically motivated case, one which is more to do with embarrassment amongst the US administration after he leaked hundreds of thousands of military and diplomatic secrets, rather than one about espionage. They're also making the case that why was Julian Assange the focus of so much interest by the US Justice Department when his supporters say he was a publisher of the information. They claim that publishers who have produced and reported on secret cables before have not seen anything like the kind of pursuit of justice that Julian Assange is facing in terms of the amount of charges, first of all, that are being put against him, and also the amount of effort the US government is going to try to get him to into a US court. And the third thing, as we heard from his wife Stella Assange there, is that they believe should he make it to the United States, deported from the UK, perhaps within 24 hours or 48 hours after the judgment on Wednesday, he would face severe physical and mental hardship. So great, they suggest, that he may try to take his own life. So these three arguments could, if the judges agree, be grounds for an appeal. And if so, this case that's gone on for 5 years already in the UK justice system may continue for much longer.
Stuart, what are you hearing? When can we have the verdict then? Okay, that was Stuart Smith joining us from London. Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny's sudden death continues to make headlines. In a social media post, Donald Trump has compared his political troubles with Navalny's mysterious death. My colleague Caroline Malone is in Washington, D.C. She gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Caroline is going to join us shortly from Washington, D.C. Seems like we're having a little bit of trouble here. Caroline, you're with me?
I am with you.
Yes.
So former US President Donald Trump has actually made his first public comments on the death of Russia's most prominent opposition leader, Alexei Navalny. Well, in a social media post, Trump compared his alleged political troubles with Navalny's mysterious death and said Navalny's sudden death has made him more aware of what's happening in the United States. Well, earlier, President Joe Biden directly blamed Putin for Navalny's death that happened in a penal colony north of the Arctic Circle. Well, the Kremlin has said that the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, hasn't seen late opposition leader Navalny's wife's video statement claiming that her husband was poisoned. Well, Russia's Dmitry Peskov chose not to comment on Yulia Navalnaya's claim, given that she said she'd recently become a widow. Peskov, however, emphasized that allegations blaming Putin for Navalny's death were absolutely unfounded and obnoxious. Well, the UN Security Council will vote on a new draft resolution on Tuesday, calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The draft document was prepared by Algeria more than 2 weeks ago. The US, Egypt, Israel and Qatar have held negotiations on a potential Israel-Hamas truce and the exchange of captives held by Hamas. Well, DD India's Jody Jacobs joins us live now from New York. Jody, is there any chance that Tuesday's ceasefire resolution will actually be passed by the UN Security Council?
Well, Caroline, I don't think there will be any surprises in the Security Council chamber this morning. The 15-member council, as you said, is expected to vote on that draft resolution. It's been in the making since the end of January, penned by Algeria, as you said, following the ICJ case in The Hague. Now, it calls for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. Now, there's been a lot of negotiation since this draft resolution was first presented. However, the US, which is Israel's strongest ally in the Security Council, has since the beginning opposed this draft, both publicly and, we are told, during negotiations. It argues that demanding a ceasefire now could jeopardize the talks that are currently taking place in Cairo. Now, this is the 8th time that the UN Security Council will vote on a draft resolution, Caroline. And only 2 out of the 7 draft resolutions were adopted, one in November and one in December. Neither of these called for a ceasefire. Now, although most council members, we are told, are expected to vote in favor of this resolution on Tuesday, the US is most likely to veto it.
And Jody, there are reports that the US has actually prepared its own resolution for the UN Security Council. How different is it from the one being voted on Tuesday?
Well, Caroline, quite different, of course, but these negotiations and the politics around a ceasefire in Gaza has begun in earnest, really, here at the United Nations headquarters. As you said, the US has now drafted its own Security Council resolution. It calls, however, for a temporary ceasefire in the Gaza Strip as soon as practical. Those are the words that are being used. And it also then opposes an Israeli ground offensive on the southern city of Rafah. It also calls for all hostages, of course, to be released. Now, what is significant about this particular draft resolution by the US is the use of the word ceasefire. It's the first time that the US has used this since it twice vetoed council resolutions that contained that particular word. However, in the US draft resolution, it doesn't specify a time frame or when the ceasefire should in fact take place. In the Algeria resolution, it's immediate, which is something that might not be something that the Russians and the Chinese might agree with. And both these countries also have veto voting rights within the council. So a lot of backroom negotiations is now going to take place within the Security Council chamber and in the corridors of the United Nations. Of course, all at a time when the fighting continues in Gaza. Caroline?
Well, that was Jody Jacobs. Thank you. Jody Jacobs reporting live from New York, where the UN is headquartered. Well, moving on, and in the latest from the Israel-Hamas conflict, Israeli forces have killed dozens of gunmen in Gaza's southern hub city of Khan Yunis over the last 24 hours. An operation included an airstrike by IDF troops on a Hamas arms cache that set off a secondary explosion. Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to continue the offensive until, quote, total victory against Hamas, after it attacked Israel on October 7th of last year. Well, the German Defence Minister Boris Pistorius has visited a German Navy frigate in Crete. During his visit, Pistorius emphasised the importance of the planned deployment of a German frigate in the Red Sea as part of an EU naval mission to protect the ships from Houthi militants in Yemen. He said the deployment is a very important signal to the Houthis and the organisations and states behind them. Well, in the latest from the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Russian drone attacks have killed 5 people from one family and damaged an industrial facility in Ukraine's northern and central regions on Tuesday. Meanwhile, at least one person was killed and several others were injured when shelling struck a residential area in the Russian-controlled city of Donetsk. Despite being under Russian control since 2014, Ukrainian troops maintain positions on the outskirts of Donetsk, resulting in regular artillery fire. While the Ukrainian military has bolstered its defences near the city of Avdiivka, which is now under Russian control. Ukraine's military commander has said the troops are taking up new defensive positions in the east in order to repel Russia's offensive. Meanwhile, Sweden has approved its 15th and largest military aid to Ukraine, worth $682 million. The latest package includes maritime assault vessels and underwater arms such as mines and subsea drones. Well, Russia's Federal Security Service has detained a woman with dual Russian-US citizenship. The arrest was made on suspicion of treason for raising funds for Ukraine's armed forces. The Los Angeles resident had allegedly been collecting funds for a Ukrainian organization whose ultimate beneficiary was the Ukrainian army. Well, farmers in various parts of Europe have escalated their agitation against EU policies, rising costs and competition from abroad. In Poland, farmers dumped grain from rail transport, enforcing a block across all border crossings with Ukraine. Meanwhile, Greek farmers are heading towards Athens to protest against rising costs. Farmers have been demonstrating over a range of grievances after an EU decision in 2022 to waive duties on Ukrainian food imports. Well, that's it from me here in Washington. Back to you in the studio, Tanvi.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for being with us. Caroline Malone joining us all from Washington, D.C. You're watching DD India Global, still to come on the show. Australia to add $7.25 billion over the next decade in defence sector to enhance their Navy's combatant fleet to being the largest since the Second World War. And the bitter reality of climate change comes through in a recent study revealing starvation threat among polar bears.
India that invents. India that innovates. India that excites. India that invites. Land of possibilities. Teeming with opportunities. Watch India Ideas each Thursday, 8 p.m. only on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. On to India's northern Jammu region. Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Jammu in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir today. He laid the foundation stone of multiple development projects worth around $4 billion in Jammu. These projects relate to several sectors spanning health, education, rail, road, aviation, petroleum, civic infrastructure, among others. The Prime Minister also dedicated Chenab Bridge, the world's highest single-arch railway bridge, to the nation. Other rail projects in Jammu and Kashmir included the new rail line between Banihal Khari, Sumbar, Sangaldan were also dedicated. He also flagged off the first electric train in the valley and also the train service between Sangaldan station and the Baramulla station. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also distributed appointment letters to about 1,500 new government recruits of Jammu and Kashmir. He also interacted with beneficiaries of various government schemes as part of the Viksit Bharat Viksit Jammu program in Jammu region. Now from Jammu to New Delhi. India's national capital gears up to host Rina Dialogue from February 21st to 23rd, and leaders have started arriving to attend this event. Sweden's Foreign Minister Tobias Billström arrived in India on Tuesday to attend the event. Latvia's Foreign Minister Krišjānis Kariņš also reached New Delhi to attend the Rina Dialogue. Earlier, Greece's Foreign Minister Georgios Gerapetritis also arrived in India early on Tuesday for the annual Rina Dialogue. India's External Affairs Minister today attended the second CII India Europe Business and Sustainability Conclave in New Delhi. Speaking at the conclave, Dr. Jaishankar said that India and Europe have much smoother interface between their economies, as India is going to be the third largest economy by the end of this decade, and European Union must be prepared for that.
Today, India has a GDP of about 3.7 something, 3.73, $3.75 trillion. That GDP by the end of the decade would be 7.3. By the time we are into our 100th year of independence, is estimated at 30 trillion. And according to Goldman Sachs, by 2075, we would be at 52.5 trillion. So that's an arithmetical way of saying that India is going to be an increasingly significant economy, the second largest by 2075, but certainly the third largest by the end of this decade in national terms. And that is something which the European Union has to take into account.
So staying in Asia, tensions continue to rise across the sensitive Taiwan Strait as China increases patrolling activities following fishermen's deaths. China's Coast Guard triggered panic among Taiwanese people by boarding a Taiwanese tourist boat. This is part of Beijing's plans to set up law enforcement activity around the Taiwan-controlled islands of Kinmen. This comes following the death of two Chinese nationals fleeing Taiwan's Coast Guard, having entered into waters too close to Kinmen. However, the head of Taiwan's Ocean Affairs Council has said that it was common for Chinese and Taiwanese tourist boats to accidentally enter the other side's waters. Moving on, COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber called on Tuesday for governments to set plans for fossil fuel transition in a move to tackle climate change issues. Earlier, the intense negotiations last December saw countries agreeing to move away from fossil fuels in COP28's UAE consensus document. This aims to limit the reliance on fossil fuels and to eliminate the severe impacts of climate change. Now, nations are calling upon to outline their strategies for achieving these goals. And now we take a look at other stories making news around the world. Australia said on Tuesday that it would add $7.25 billion over the next decade in defense. The additional funding will put emphasis on accelerated delivery of the Navy's future service combatant fleet. The Navy will also expand its fleet of warships from 11 to 26 vessels. This is the largest since the end of the Second World War. German airline Lufthansa's ground staff walked off the job at major airports on Tuesday ahead of the wage talks due to continue on Wednesday. This is their second strike this month, demanding greater pay amid high inflation. Over 100,000 passengers will be affected by the strike due to run till Wednesday. Milan residents were seen wearing face masks outdoors on Tuesday due to skin irritation and eye discomfort caused by the polluted air. The level of fine particles and other pollutants in Milan's air have surpassed legal limits, making it one of the most polluted cities globally. Over 200 artists from 25 countries showcased vibrant performances at the inaugural triennial festival in Rwanda's capital city, Kigali. The festival celebrated local artists and aimed to foster collaboration between African creatives and international artists. Next, a story that should be of great importance to all of us. A recent research published in the journal Nature Communications has revealed starvation threat among polar bears in ice-free Arctic periods. The researchers used video cameras, GPS collars to track the polar bears for 3-week periods over the course of 3 years in the western Hudson Bay, where the ice-free period has increased by 3 weeks from 1979 to 2015. A report.
A recent study revealed that polar bears are facing an increased risk of starvation due to spending more time on land during extended ice-free seasons. The researchers watched 20 polar bears for weeks in the Hudson Bay region of Manitoba, Canada, and found them struggling to find food, with seals out of reach. The researchers used collars equipped with video cameras and GPS to track their movements. They found a diversity of behaviors ranging from bears conserving energy by resting to actively foraging for terrestrial food.
We ended up monitoring 20 polar bears on land in Waipus National Park. We used GPS-enabled video camera collars on each bear. We simultaneously measured their energy expenditure and measured their changes in body weight. So the video data provided us detailed information about their behavior, their diet.
The researchers also found that the younger polar bears are even at greater risk. This is due to their small size and lack of skills as compared to the adult ones.
What we found was that it's really the younger bears, the subadults, that are at greatest risk of starvation. Those bears are smaller, given their younger age compared to an adult bear. As a result of their small size, they're not able to accumulate as much body fat as a larger bear would be able to do. Also, they're not as experienced as an adult bear would be, so they aren't as skilled at catching seals while the sea ice is present.
According to the researchers, the polar bear population in the area has already declined by an estimated 30% since 1987. The findings indicate that polar bears across the Arctic are at risk of starvation as the ice-free period continues to grow. Nikita's report, DD India.
The message is clear. We have to adopt pro-planet choices. Now, a story of sustainability. Two friends in Western France have built a 16-meter high replica of the Eiffel Tower from recycled wood, which they hope to display along the path of the summer 2024 Olympic torch relay and on Olympic sites. The project was to build a wooden Eiffel Tower replica using as much recycled material as possible. They began construction in September 2023. They are soon hoping to get authorization to display their amazing work of art near the Olympic sites. That's it in this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. We apologize for the little errors that we had in our transmission today. Connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter and Instagram at DD India Live. You can also find us online at ddindia.co.in. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I am Tanvi Taneja. From all of us here in New Delhi, thank you for watching. Namaskar.